So you made this internet only advertisement. It went viral, and how much did it increase their sales?
Like I said, immediately it increased their sales by 300%.
300%.
And then, since then, it just continued to grow.
Welcome to the Red, Green, Blue Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast with Joel Ackerman. Joel Ackerman is a very talented writer-director who was very influential in the early days of social media viral marketing with his Poo Pourri ad, and has acted and written and plays and directed and worked with Red Bull and Angel Studios and just published a book that sold 50,000 copies, and is just an amazingly creative, talented guy, and I'm really excited to talk to him. So, I mean, basically, what I want to start out with, I noticed that, like, your experience in college, you had a lot of things on there that you just looked like you were a go-getter in college. Was that the case?
Yeah. Ever since I would say in 7th grade, middle school, I've been an overachiever in the sense that I just want to be involved doing stuff. I want to be very active. I don't like sitting around. So yeah, I like creating. That's what drives me, is accomplishing things, getting things done, creating things that I can share with other people. So yeah, very involved as much as I can. And then I'm social. So that added things because I wanted to be doing things with other people too.
No, it's true. And I've noticed that in film. It's weird because I come from kind of documentary photography. So it's a very different personality type that's in documentary photography into film. But like filmmakers, like extroversion is a very common thing. I think that's why you hear about LA parties like all the time. Like LA parties are so famous because it's such a collaborative medium. It really draws extroverted people.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, especially in theater. And I actually didn't get involved in theater really ever. I did a few things again in 6th grade. I did a few plays, but doing theater again last year for the first time, you realize how social these people are. And I think that extends to film also.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing. So what do you feel like you did first? Was it acting, writing, or directing?
Well, very, very, very first, I always wanted to write. So before I could even read, I saw my dad typing on a computer when I was 4 years old, and I put 2 and 2 together because I saw him typing and saw the words populating. This would have been back in the 80s, late 80s, and saw the words populating and knew what books were, and was like, oh, so someone creates these books, because as a kid, you don't think about that. You just have the books. And then I thought, oh, so I could create books because that's how you do it. You write it and it types up, and you kind of, I put it all together. And so from the time I was 4, I wanted to be a writer, and my dad would sit me in his lap and I would tell him what to write and he would type it, and I saw the words populate on the page. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So I've always been interested in writing. And then at around, by 1st grade, I was interested in performing. I would go to, school, and my teacher would let me perform. I would write plays with my buddy. I mean, these plays lasted literally 30 seconds. There's like a scene or an exchange of dialogue, but I called them plays. And she said if I was well behaved in class, because I normally was disrupting class, that I could perform these plays at the end of the day. So
really, to the whole class?
Yeah, to the whole class.
So that's very generous. She gave you an audience. That's
she was
amazing.
a great teacher because instead of squashing this element of, okay, this kid wants attention, instead of being like, no, you're bad for wanting attention, she channeled it, right? She said, no, you can't do that right now. I need to teach class. But if you cooperate with me, I'll reward you at the end of the day by having, 60 seconds, a few minutes to entertain the class.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a wonderful teacher.
Yeah, Miss Meeks. I pay tribute to her often in my career because I think she was very influential in not discouraging the creative, juices that I had.
Yeah, what grade was this in?
1st grade.
In 1st grade. Wow.
Incredible.
That is incredible because that's usually like a discipline grade.
Yeah.
Right? That's interesting. Well, that's very wonderful. So what was like, so how did you get involved with Poo Pourri? And tell me about the story of that experience.
Okay, so skipping.
Oh, wait, let me give some backstory for
Sure.
people who might not be aware of it. But Poo Pourri, like, just took off, went viral, was viewed. It basically launched a whole company, maybe even a whole product type in a way. And just is like, it got a lot of national coverage in advertising media because it was just so revolutionary at the time. So anyway, and Joel was the writer and the director on that ad, and he's going to tell us about how that happened.
Yeah, so I went to college. By that time, my father is a marketer, a marketing coach. He taught people how to get more customers, to pay them more money more often. And he had a newsletter that he would send out monthly, and it went to like 1,000 people. And he sent them out on printed, paper, and then a cassette tape. Okay, this was the era. And he would make us listen to these. And so I learned marketing as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, stuffing these envelopes and listening to my dad's hour-long lectures about marketing. They were entertaining.
Wow, so you were raised in marketing.
Yeah, I was raised in it, but I wanted to do creative things. So when I got to college, I had this marketing background that I kind of grew up in. My dad said, no matter what you do, you're going to have to market yourself. So that's why you guys have to listen to these tapes. So I learned marketing, and then I was studying film, and I was also doing stand-up comedy in college. And my roommate, Jeff Harmon of Harmon Brothers ad agency, popular ad agency. But before
it's popular, when he was still just a roommate.
Yeah,
right?
Before there was an ad agency, but he later went on.
Yeah, they'd go on to have like 100 employees, do ad campaigns for all the major companies. Really big deal.
Yeah. So anyway, he said, "Oh, you know more about marketing than most of the guys who I'm studying marketing with in school, and you're a writer and a filmmaker, and you're funny. I'm going to hire you to do an ad." And so he hired me to do.
It's a powerful combination.
Yeah, he hired me to do a tongue cleaner ad for a product called Orabrush.
Oh, I remember that ad.
Yeah, and so I did a couple ads for them, and that blew up. And then, so when Poo Pourri contacted Jeff Harmon, he said, "Yeah, let me get my friend Joel. He'll write it and direct it." And we kind of did the same thing but better for Poo Pourri.
Yeah. What year is this again?
So Poo Pourri was 2013.
2013. So social media was still a pretty new thing back then.
Yeah, YouTube had just really started pushing videos as marketing in 2009. So it was, 4 years, but they still were figuring it out. And not a lot of companies had figured it out.
No, companies are really slow to move.
Yeah.
And so they're just used to like, oh, we buy ad space on Friends reruns, and they're just used to that format.
Either TV, radio, magazines. Not a lot of people were really taking risks. People would do banner ads before they did video ads on
banner ads
digital.
are like absurd now. I mean, you rarely see banner ads, but that was the main internet marketing for a very long time.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, so your roommate's with him. You did Orabrush, and he's asking you to do this Poo Pourri ad.
Yeah, and of course, I was living in LA at that time, pursuing the film thing, and so I was like, yeah, of course I'll do it, because you needed the money. So I wrote the ad. I wrote a couple ads for him, it like I said, like you said, I guess it just blew up. I mean, people were talking about it on the radio, on TV, everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it's just like, it was fantastic. So I mean, how long did it take you to shoot it? I mean, I guess when you do things like that, you have no idea what the result is going to be. You feel like you're just doing another movie. I mean, another little commercial, right?
Yeah, you don't really know. I mean, we knew it was funny, obviously, but it only took 2 days to shoot. Most people are surprised when they hear how inexpensively it was done.
Yeah, it's got one actress. How did you find the actress? She does a really good job with it.
Yeah, so that was, we had a friend who since passed away, who was a acting teacher at a local university. And we had just looked at, probably 20 actresses, and none of them felt perfect. They felt okay, but, we said, do you know anyone, especially because we wanted a British accent? He said, well, I know this gal, she's Scottish, but she could probably do a better British accent than most Americans.
Well, that's hilarious. I mean, because like I went to graduate school in Scotland and they do not like England. Like it's passionate. Like I had no idea how much one country can hate another until I lived in Scotland. But anyway, but
if there's a paycheck in it,
paycheck in it, and she lived around it, so she could do it. Yeah, no, I bet she could.
Yeah, so she did a great job. And
honestly, I find that's a lot of way people learn accents is by using them in a comic way, maybe not respectful of the English. Not really.
Very true.
Right?
Very true.
Anyway, so she was really good at English accent, and so
and so we the dirty little secret about that script is that it's inspired by my wife.
Are you serious? So just so you know, I mean, this is a little potty humor, but that's what the product is. Poo Pourri is a scented oil you dump on your toilet water. Spray on your toilet water after you poop. And it's like,
or before you go, you spray it, and it prevents the stench from spreading.
Yes, and they actually saw it. They're selling it at Costco right now. So in packs of 3. So it's a popular product.
Yeah,
today.
It blew up the business, right? The business at the time was doing $10 million a year annually. So it wasn't a small business by any means, but not huge. And now they're probably doing 30 times that.
Wow. Oh gosh, yeah. So anyway, you cast her, and was it just good luck? Did you look at a lot of people, or
probably not as many as you'd think. Like I said, we probably looked. I don't recall looking at a ton. We probably looked at. I try to look at a lot anytime I cast a lead role like that, but maybe 20, 30, 40 people, and until we found her, and then we just knew she was perfect. We dyed her hair a little bit more red again because that was visually interesting. And a little allusion to my wife, who's a redhead. And, we were off to the races.
Well, that is great. Yeah. Well, to me, like your background in acting, to me, like to spot acting, you have to know how to act. It's the same thing. Like to spot good carpentry, you have to be something of a carpenter yourself. Mm-hmm. You're like, if oh, well, that's really good. And that's hard. I think a lot of people acting in particular, it just kind of looks like it just happens. People make a mistake of like casting their girlfriend or stuff like that. Like, oh, well, she can say my lines. I'm a genius photographer. It'll work.
Yeah.
But like casting is super important, I feel. And
it's the biggest part of directing, I think, is getting the casting right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. I mean, you think like also just what a major shift that is. I mean, there's like actors have ranges, I guess, but really there's a limit in what one person can do. And so just picking the right person influences the feeling of everything so much.
100%.
Yeah. So how do you feel? Like, what do you look for in an actor when you're casting? Is it just like a feeling?
Well, it's different for an ad than for a movie, right? Because they're totally different kinds of things. With most movies, unless you're doing something really stylized and maybe experimental and weird, you're looking for verisimilitude. You're looking for reality. You want it to feel real. With an ad, you're not really worried about that. You don't necessarily want you don't want it to feel cheesy or, again, like they're a bad actor. So they got to be able to do the line still, but you don't have to believe it. You don't have to believe that this person, because people are smart. So when I direct an ad, one of the things that one of my approaches to marketing was, look, people know this is an ad. Let's not pretend that it's not an ad. So in the writing of an ad, I would talk about the product explicitly and the features and benefits of the product instead of just trying to be, I felt like most TV ads, they tried to entertain you and then throw in the product at the end. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, we're going to trick this person. We're going to entertain them. Then we're going to throw in the product at the end. And because people liked the ad, they're going to like the product. And I thought that's the stupidest thing in the world. Convince me that I want your product. And I can still be entertaining, but I'm not going to try and hide the fact that I'm trying to sell you a product. So all my ads are very explicitly ads. They're entertaining still, but they're very explicitly talking about the product and selling you the product. They're not like showing some real life scenario and then, at the end, here's the product. I don't believe in that. So with an ad, you don't, getting to your question, you don't necessarily have to believe the person's real. They can just be the spokesperson for the product. But with an ad, I look for, is the delivery entertaining? Is it quick? A lot of people, like the number one thing that I would teach if I was teaching people to audition to get a commercial is speak clearly and quickly, right? Just do the lines quickly. Whereas in film, I still think pacing is good and important, but you want to do it more realistically, and people don't talk rapidly like they do in a commercial.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, well, and also to me, that was probably the beginning of that. I think that's the biggest shift. People have a better BS filter than they used to, and they can see through an ad. And so if you're going to be an ad, just be an honest ad.
Yes.
And people want genuineness and honesty. And that's what I feel in that ad she's doing. She's talking straight to the camera and she's telling you, this is what it is.
Yep.
And so there's just like an authenticity to it.
And I started that 4 years previously with the Orabrush ads, the tongue cleaner ads that I did. It just said, again, there's those infomercials. It used to be that you had kind of branded style ads, which are these videos that try to entertain you and be cool and then kind of show the product, but they wouldn't sell you on the product necessarily. It was just like the feeling of it. And then there were infomercials, which were boring and cheesy, but they sold you on the features and benefits of the product. And my whole thinking was, there is no good reason why you can't have an entertaining infomercial. Like you could do all the same stuff you do to make a movie entertaining, visually, funny, use comedy, but just sell the product. There's no reason why you couldn't do a really good job doing that. And that was essentially the model for these products.
Yeah, no, and I think also internet. Well, of course, internet advertising now runs everything. But back then, it's like people like a 30-second ad spot because it was so time on the network or wherever you're broadcasting was so expensive. You couldn't do this.
You couldn't do that.
But the Poo Pourri, what's the run length on? It's like a minute or two.
No,
right?
Yeah, it's 2:16.
2:16, which like at the time would be like, oh, that's crazy long.
Right.
Like you'd have to pay 5 times as much every time you ran it, and also there's a thing in marketing where it's like people need to see the ad multiple times for it to really register. And so they're like, oh, someone's going to watch like 7 minutes of this, but so at the time, these were all really revolutionary things to do an internet only ad. And also it's funny. And so people would like share it.
Right.
Which I think that might've decreased now. Like Facebook, you kind of have to pay for your access now.
It's less now, one, because it's less novel, right?
Yeah, people aren't going to share it. Stuff
right. They're just not sharing as much. Also, people get tired of people sharing stuff. I mean, I think it's associated with the older people too. Like if you reposting a lot, that feels more like a old person who just constantly is reposting stuff. Yeah. So there's reasons why that virality doesn't exist and is a lot harder to achieve in today's advertising climate than
well, partially, I mean, you were like the only one, now you got a lot of competition. And also a thing like back in the early days of Facebook, it kind of felt like one big high school reunion. I don't know. It kind of went through like phases, you're like, oh my goodness, I haven't seen you in 20 years,
Right.
But then it kind of became more influencer dominated and more, honestly, just more commercial, and people feel it. And I think that's affected engagement, affected like, but in 2007 or 8, everybody just loved Facebook. I know like that's like a little bit controversial, but now it's controversial. But back then it was just like, this is the best invention that's ever been created.
Right.
I'm going to be flat out. So, well, that's great. So you made this an internet only advertisement. It went viral. And how much did it increase their sales?
Like I said, immediately it increased their sales by 300%.
300%.
And then, since then, it just continued to grow.
Do they use the same ad?
And they do, as far as I know, they've created many, many other ads.
Yeah.
Including 2 more that I worked on. But I think that's still their most effective ad.
No, it's interesting. I won't say who, but there's another client, is like a CEO of a major corporation around here was a relative of mine. And he was complaining about paying residual fees. But he said, but it just works so much better than any of our other ads. I'm like, well, that's why you're paying the residual fee.
Right.
But like, it just made him so mad. But I couldn't, if you're out there, kids, the way to make money in everybody, even like the big names, Spike Lee and whatever, they make all their money from advertising. Like fiction films, they take way too long to put together and it's just way too ambiguous. So even like, Michael Bay will shoot advertisements and like direct advertisements.
I've heard that. Yeah. And it's satisfying to me because I have a great track record of producing ads that sell, but then also have a long shelf life.
Yeah.
The ad I created for Poo Pourri is still being used. The ad I created for Orabrush, they ran that ad for, I don't know, 10, 12 years. And a normal ad shelf life is 1, maybe 2 years.
1 or 2 years, yeah.
And mine easily 5 times that.
Oh, did you get checks for that length of
No.
time? Oh, shoot.
No.
It's too early in your career. Yeah. No, I have a friend who did a ad for a major auto company. And he said, like, yeah, it was weird. Like, I did it, and it was like huge success. Like, they used it on front page of everything. And he said, yeah, I didn't like work for a year after that, but I was like, okay, because I kept paying.
Right.
So it's just, it's kind of a common thing in advertisement is that you get a percentage of the ad spend. So like again, I don't know if this is dying out. I mean, I wouldn't like go to the mattresses on this, but agents that's what they do. Is like, so if they spend $1 million running it, you get a percentage of that,
right,
of the run. And so if they spend $10 million running it, you get like a pretty big check.
Right.
So, and that's all with the quality of the content. So, you worked at Red Bull for a while. So
for Red Bull,
not at, you weren't staff. So you did some project with Red Bull. Red Bull, of course, is like the king of clever advertising in a lot of ways. And so what did you do there?
So that was when I was in LA. They'd seen the success of Poo Pourri, and they brought me and my brother on to develop a web series, which I don't think ended up doing that well. But it was the first music web series. It was about a band, and it was kind of interactive. They would ask the audience to vote on things, I think, at the end of each episode. And I think there were 10 episodes. We helped them develop that. So it was kind of a bold idea that I think didn't quite align with Red Bull's brand, in the sense that it was about a rock band or kind of a punk, counterculture band. So in that way it kind of did, but Red Bull was really known at that time for their stunt videos, the man jumping from space and, those kind of videos. And so it was them trying something new that, had a decent following because it was Red Bull, but it didn't blow up. It didn't become viral or anything, but it was a cool exercise in developing. Again, this is what I ended up mostly doing in LA, which was development, because, as a writer, one of my strengths is structure, making sure that you've got a complete story and the story's got a beginning, middle, and end, and you care about the characters and all of those things. And so I was brought on for that aspect of that project.
Yeah, well, coincidentally, which is very much harder than you think. I think a lot of people who haven't written would be like, oh, beginning, middle, and end, like whatever, everything's got that. I'm like, no,
it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. In fact, the first thing I ask if like a younger person I know is like working on film is like, so how is it? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, does it have a beginning, middle, and end? Because you'd be surprised how many independent films do not have a beginning, middle, and end.
Well, and by asking that question, you can really start to tell how well the writer knows their own craft, because based on their answer, right?
Yeah.
Because if they kind of look at you like, well, yeah, what do you mean? Yeah, everything has a beginning, middle, and end. Then okay, you're not that tuned into the structure of especially film, right?
Yeah, film, yeah.
Novels have a little bit more freedom because they're kind of like the internet ads of what we were describing compared to TV ads. TV ads were 30 seconds or a minute long, and so you had to fit them into that time. And that's kind of how film is. We're so used to a specific structure in film and TV that it kind of has to follow that structure, where novels can be a little bit more loosey-goosey, and you can go over here and explore this and get in the mind of people. You can do more with a novel that you can't do with film.
But I still think people demand to begin, middle, and end.
Oh,
like
I agree.
if you have a novel without an end, you're going to have unhappy people.
You need to have setups and payoffs, and there's got to be satisfaction. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, and also a thing I find with writing is that like beginnings are easy, middles are hardish, ends are killer. It's really hard to figure out how to end something, end it well. And it's weird because like I think like the end is what people take with them.
I agree.
Like they're the thing that they remember. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, do you have a different opinion on that? But
well, I have an interesting take, which is if you have a really strong beginning, you should know how you kind of will know how it's supposed to end by the setup of a really strong beginning. And that's not obviously necessarily true, but lots of times if you set up a character's clear want and needs, you'll know where the story needs to end up based on that.
No, it's true. And the character, if you do the characters right and the beginning right, it will lead you in the writing to a good end.
Yes.
Right. So, and of course, I don't know if you're different. It's always good to have a good end in mind when you begin.
Yes. And again, I think if you set up a strong beginning, you'll know where it's supposed to end. And it's interesting to look at some stories and realize that either they didn't set up a strong beginning or the story doesn't take you where it's supposed to go based on the beginning. And that's why it's unsatisfying, even though it technically ends. And that's why these, unsavvy writers look at you and go, what do you mean? Does it have an ending? Yeah, it ends. It doesn't go on forever. But no, does the ending make you feel completed? Has it completed an arc?
Yeah, well, and also like what you say, and it all ties together. And that's where you see like in student scripts, they'll often even just kind of like, and then he dies, but it has no connection to like whatever's going on. He gets depressed and he dies. I don't know, whatever. But like then you look at like Romeo and Juliet, where it's like you can see the characters' flaws and positives and the situation they're in guiding to their ultimate death.
Yeah.
And even the way they die refers to what you've been seeing the whole time through.
Right.
So it's, I don't know, satisfying or tragic,
Well, tragedies are satisfying in a different way.
In a different way, yeah. I have to admit, I remember when I was like a freshman in high school and we read Romeo and Juliet, I got to the end and I was like, but wait a minute, this is so dumb. Like, she just wakes up after he kills himself. Like, if you don't know the end of Romeo and Juliet, like, Romeo shows up, thinks that Juliet's dead, kills himself. Then she wakes up, sees that Romeo's dead, and then she kills himself. Like, what the crap?
Yeah.
I do think Shakespeare liked killing people. Like, if you look at Hamlet, a comical amount of people die at the end of that. And like almost a comical amount.
No, it is a comical amount. My whole take on Hamlet, also rooted in my high school experience, is that it is a comedy. I mean, it's a dark comedy. There's no question, but the amount of people that died just rapidly at the end.
It's like 15 people.
And in the way they die, it's not like a battle or something. It's comical.
It is comical.
And it's a dark comedy, but it's a comedy.
Yeah, but again, like in the story, you can see everything leading up to all that death.
Yes, it's set up.
And the kind of the Romeo and Juliet, a lot of people think it's about romance. It's not. It's about impetuousness of youth, really, primarily. Yeah. And so that's where like they impetuously kill themselves, for no good reason.
Right.
And it avoided the whole tragedy if they didn't, but that's throughout it. So, anyway, sorry, enough about the Shakespeare talk. Go check out what's Leonardo DiCaprio.
You mentioned that I did a lot of things in college. One of the things that I did was study Shakespeare. So yeah, I love it.
Shakespeare is fantastic. And I know this is a thing, I think a problem people have with Shakespeare is they read it in high school and you read like 3 pages at once and it's boring and you're like, you have to analyze it and there's homework involved. So you kind of get turned off on it. But like if you just like read a Shakespeare play, like no assignment, just sit down, read it in a few hours, you'd be like, oh my goodness, this is astonishing.
Yeah.
Like
or see it performed.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is, that's the other thing that stops people is they stop before the language kind of connects. The language, and I'm not the first to say this, everyone says this, if you watch it or read a Shakespeare, it's hard for the first 10, 15 minutes. And then suddenly you realize you're not even noticing that it's in this archaic language.
Yeah, no, I do think the language is a big barrier to people. But yeah, no, it's really great. You should read it all if you're interested in writing or film or anything. And the funny thing is, this is interesting. Like when you're starting out in a medium, I've had this, I'm sure you've had this experience, is that you encounter things and you have no idea that like, oh, I'm going to be living with this my whole life. Like major people like Shakespeare. And you're like, what's the big deal about that? Also, I think another thing is like when you're in, when you're 14 and a freshman in high school, you're not really ready to even understand it. Like you have no perspective on it,
Yeah.
And
it is weird. I that's a good point. Like, why are they? It's still fairly elevated, and it's mostly about adults. I didn't read Romeo and Juliet as a kid. They had us read Hamlet, and it is kind of, if you think about it, funny that they have you read Hamlet as a teenager.
Gosh, yeah.
Because
you've never even like broken up with somebody.
Yeah.
It's like, I totally understand what he's going through with Ophelia.
Right.
Like, oh my goodness, Yeah, like, oh, my dad died. I mean, yeah, you just don't even know.
Right.
Like, so, I mean, that's actually an interesting thing I did is I reread all the books that we were required to read in high school as an adult.
That's
and
cool.
It was like the best reading list I've almost ever had because you encounter a lot of good stuff then. But you're just really not ready to totally understand it. So you did marketing, then you have your own. So you've done a lot of ads on your own.
Yeah,
you
so
essentially have your own marketing agency.
I do.
Right?
It's a creative agency. So it's called Ackermaniacreative. You can't find us online. You have to reach out to me directly. But yeah, I still do ads to this day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So like what type of ads are you doing nowadays?
So coming up, I'm doing another ad for the pocket hose. You've seen that hose. It expands and contracts.
Oh yeah,
it's very cool.
So you don't have to coil it up.
Yeah, you don't have to coil it up. It's small and lightweight and it's strong. And they've just invented a new thing. Anyway, it's incredible. They make it better every time. And then I'm doing an ad for a vacuum coming up also, and just recently got done at the end of last year doing an ad for a mattress that I've done several ads for.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fantastic. That's a lot of good work. So another thing he did, he was creative director at Angel Studios, and if you're not familiar with them, they did The Chosen, but also they did Sounds of Freedom,
Sound of Freedom, yeah.
Sound of Freedom, which is probably the most successful independent film of all time because it's amazing. It's independently made, but also is independent. This small little studio marketed and distributed it, and it made over $100 million.
Over $200 million.
Over $200 million.
$250 million, I think.
I mean, to give you an idea, like the biggest hits coming out of Sundance, marketed and distributed by made independently, but marketed and distributed by major studios like Little Miss Sunshine and stuff, they didn't hit that. I mean, maybe even half of that. So It's really quite astonishing. So what, you were involved with the marketing of that, right?
Yeah, the social media marketing.
So tell me what that experience was like and when you guys knew it was going to be a big hit.
Well, from a personal standpoint, it was important to me because I'd read articles about human sex trafficking and child sex trafficking and had been so disturbed by them that I turned the other way, which was the wrong response, I'll admit now. I think the importance of Sound of Freedom was that it exposed something that no one really wanted. I mean, people knew about it.
But they don't want to talk about it.
But they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to look at it because it's so disturbing. And I understand that impulse. But it was important that we kind of shed a light in the darkness and get it out there. So my part at Angel was trying to push and move the needle in that direction. And we did several interviews on a podcast for Angel. We interviewed Jim Caviezel, who was the star of Sound of Freedom. He was also in Count of Monte Cristo and Passion of the Christ. And then the director, the producer, one of the executives at Operation Underground Railroad. And we just talked about the issue. We also talked about the film, obviously, but we talked about the issue and how you overcome the disturbing nature of the subject to actually make a difference some way. So that was my role primarily, but it was an incredible ride seeing it go from, like you said, this little independent film, which couldn't find distribution with a major studio
for like years.
years, to Angel taking it on and taking it. Literally, it was one of the top 10 films of that year, I believe.
That's really just amazing. And they're based in Provo, Utah,
Yeah.
which is like, anyway, I think that's a change we're seeing in the film industry in general. It shows is that as studios kind of back off theatrical distribution, there's more space for one thing. You're not going to be kicked out by Spider-Man 3 or whatever, because that was a big concern for independent film back in the day. And so they have things they want to show, but also the internet empowers smaller distributors to market on par with major ones.
Yeah, because the truth of the matter is the internet is still the best place to market, even if it's not accepted as such. It's still the best place to market. Your ability to target and retarget just blows anything else out of the water in terms of TV or any other medium for marketing.
Okay, well, let's talk about your the opportunity, the book you wrote. So tell me about. I actually haven't read it, so I can't speak. It's got very good illustrations, though.
Yeah, beautifully illustrated. It's interesting. A lot of what I've done has been kind of with advertising, kind of seeing a problem in a space and going, well, that doesn't make any sense. So why can't we do it? And in the case of this book, I wrote a poem. First of all, it's a poem, and poetry doesn't sell. If you want to not make money as a writer, become a poet.
100%. I talked to major poets. I'm like, how many books did they print? They're like 500.
Yeah, exactly. And so I wrote a poem, and I said, okay, well, I needed to have it illustrated. It's a story anyway, so it made sense to have it illustrated. I sent it to publishers, traditional publishers, and they said, this is really beautiful, but we don't know how we would sell it. We don't know how, and they don't do any marketing. So it wasn't about marketing.
No,
it was
true.
just, they don't know how to position it. Like what shelf do we put this on? It's a picture book. And this was before it was illustrated, but I said, I think this should be a picture book. And they said, well, it's a picture book for adults.
That's a hard one.
And
You're right.
they don't have a section for that.
No, they don't.
So, but I'm going, a lot of the picture books that adults buy, they buy because they like them, not because their kids like them.
Yeah, like Dr. Seuss is a good
Dr.
example.
Seuss, The Giving Tree.
Yeah.
There's lots of these books that, going back to what we're talking about with Shakespeare, like kids don't get the depth of these picture books, but adults do. And so I said, well, that's stupid. So I made my own video because that's what I do. I'm a filmmaker and in advertising. So I made my own video. And like you said, we've sold over 50,000 copies and it continues to sell.
No, I think that's just amazing. I mean, that's so empowering. Yeah. And speaking of like kids, like not getting things, I mean, it's cute. Like I watched, what was it? The Disney Peter Pan movie with my nieces and nephews. And like that movie, I haven't seen it as an adult. It really is about being middle-aged. And it's really a lot about Captain Hook, a lot. And so like, of course, I never got that before when I was a kid.
Sure.
But as far as like, because Captain Hook's vanity and him struggling, like being jealous of Peter Pan's youth and fearful of death. Perfect combination of being miserable. And he's a miserable person with those three things. But my nieces, they loved it when he ran on top of the alligator's mouth. I think they would call that the Captain Hook running on top of alligator's mouth moment, the movie, because that was just such a big response. But of course, they're not getting like anything about Captain Hook's deliberations about middle age.
Right.
So, but the grown-ups are, and that's one of the neat things about children's media if you want to work in that area. That's great. So one thing about structure I think is really interesting, especially that's what you've done a lot of work on. So like to me, like, I mean, where I say like beginnings, because everyone kind of gets a beginning. It's like, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be a good beginning, but even to start writing, you get a beginning. But you're right. The end really shows everything on that. If you have any advice on how people should even just even write like, okay, I'm going to write a story, beginning, middle, end, like actually write it out.
Well,
or
and this isn't my advice. I just think learn structure, and the structure very simply is the character has to have a clear want, and they probably should also have a clear need, which is to say something that they need to change about themselves. And usually they're not aware of it. Sometimes they're aware of it, but they're so focused on the want that they're not paying attention to the need. So preferably your main character has a clear want and need. And then you have an inciting incident, which sets the story in motion. And that's toward the beginning of your first act, toward the beginning of your story. And then the biggest event is the point of no return, which is something that happens early on in the story in which the character can no longer go back to being the character they were when the story started, and sets them on the course to either achieving or not achieving their want.
Yeah.
And probably their need. Lots of times they don't achieve their want, but they do achieve their need. So, I mean, it's not rocket science. You just have to make sure you have all the pieces. As a minimum, you have to make sure you have all the pieces. Because if you don't have those pieces of setting up the story, then you're not going to have a good ending. Because even if you do have all those pieces, and the other piece I would mention is at the end of Act 2, which is at the end of your long middle, you've got to have a big low, a point in which the character now seems farther from achieving their want than ever before. And if you don't have these pieces, then you're going to have a really bad story. Even with all those pieces, you might not have a good story if you don't do them skillfully and artfully and interestingly, but you really won't have anything if you don't have those pieces.
Oh yeah. No, and again, it's also just filling out the middle is hard. Like, I mean, just go back to Romeo and Juliet.
I think the middle's the hardest, personally.
Really, you think the middle? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's all hard.
It's all hard, yeah.
Because it's hard to create a great story that keeps people's interest. But I think most movies don't set up a good beginning, but they do a good enough job that usually you keep watching. You don't walk out of the theater.
Yeah.
But in the middle, it starts to feel longer and longer because they don't keep it interesting. Maybe because they didn't set up enough interest in the character. You don't care enough about the character or whatever. So by the middle, you're starting to not care. And now you're pissed off because you realize you're in a bad movie. But it's not bad enough that you're going to walk out, but it's just like, this is kind of a waste of time. And then by the end, it unravels because probably they didn't set up the beginning. But usually they have a climax that's kind of interesting, at least visually or something. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's all hard.
No, it's all hard, and certainly all ties together. And again, the funny thing about writing and even a story, like let's just say, like, I mean, I should probably use Marvel movies for people to be more familiar with them. But like
I wouldn't. I don't watch them.
Yeah, I watch them. I like movies, so I watch everything. I like going to the movie theater. To me, it's been a bummer that like there's not as many movies to go to. Yeah. Like just period.
I agree.
Even if you want to go see a bad movie, you can't go see a bad movie.
Right.
But like let's say like Spider-Man. You know, it's like, okay, he gets bit by a spider. He gets great power, so he needs great responsibility, whatever that line is. And so he realizes his great power and his great responsibility, and he acts on it, he grows into it, and then he defeats the goblin or whatever. I guess it's the goblin in that one. And so that's like the resolution. I mean, that sounds so simple, but that is so hard. So hard. Very few people can do that. Honestly, even a bad movie, very few people can just even write a bad movie. I mean, you know, you think like bad, I don't know, like Madam Web or whatever, like they got paid millions of dollars, you know?
Yeah.
You know?
It is amazing how many bad movies get made and how easily they could have been fixed also. In terms of just, at least, again, the major building blocks.
Yeah.
Just making sure there's a few different moments in there that set something off that pays off later, or pays something off that's been set up and never paid off.
Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, like, I mean, I fully respect, like, they're smart people. They're paid a lot of money. It's very competitive to get in that position, and they didn't do a good job. So that shows how hard it is.
Right.
You know, I don't know if it's like perspective, because clearly, like, once it's shown in the theater, like, it's pretty apparent that, like, it's a bad movie.
Well, I think in
script.
the case of films, you have multiple things at play, and my giving them the benefit of the doubt goes kind of like this, which is that probably this is my hope, and it could be that they just are not a good writer and they got there by virtue of who they know, but it could be that they are a good writer and the executives are inserting themselves where they ought not, or there's committees. And so people start making changes, and usually they, it's usually not one writer on a script. It's usually, they go through a series of writers. And so but the producer likes this thing, or one executive likes this thing, and he says, you have to keep that. And it doesn't really work, but they keep it because they've been told they have to. But the problem with changing writers so much is you get brought on, it's not your project. You're not the originator of it, which is already a problem because they're doing reboots and remakes. So you're not these writers aren't the originators of this anyway.
Yeah.
And so I think there's less invested in those stories. They don't feel like they have to make them great because it's a paycheck.
Yeah.
It's not their story anyway. So what do they care? They're going to make their money and, they'll go on.
Yeah, that's true,
But my benefit of the doubt is that it's writing by committee and executives sticking their opinions where they ought not.
Yeah, still, again, it's very difficult to become a Hollywood executive.
Sure.
So, it's to me, it's amazing how many people work in art, and let's just transfer it to music for a bit. How rare a Hey Jude is, by the Beatles.
Yeah.
And when you think how many people are engaged in the medium, and Hey Jude by the Beatles doesn't seem like a particularly difficult thing to do, but it's really, really, really hard, and virtually nobody can do it. Nobody.
And that's the mystical, magical part of art, which is even if you check all those boxes, it still may not connect emotionally, and you don't know what is going to connect emotionally.
Yeah.
And that's, I've been more thinking of the Marvel categories, but if you take some really great filmmakers famously Spielberg or even Christopher Nolan, and you look at the movies that aren't their hits, it's at some level, it becomes a numbers game where it's even the best filmmakers or musicians or painters, they're not all going to be masterpieces.
Yeah.
Even though they got the same tools and they're putting the same amount of effort into whatever they're creating, you just don't know what's going to connect with the public at the end of the day. You can guess, but you may not be right.
No, that's 100% true. I feel that, that's where I'm always kind of advocating that plastic arts, that's where you make something, is actually more common with dance or performance art. You just kind of you do the dance, and sometimes it's amazing and sometimes it's not. But the important thing is that you keep doing the dance. Because, I do think that with acting, if you're a dancer, ballet dancer, you have to get up on that stage and you dance every night. You just have to. And that's when you do anything for a living, you just have to get up and make that ad or make that movie. And, sometimes it turns out amazing, sometimes not. And honestly, if people are being honest with you, their greatest thing they made, they'll have no idea why it turned out so amazing.
Yeah.
It's a mystery to them.
Yeah.
And you can even hear this in interviews. Just for the record. So people who make movies, they often they watch the AFI 100, they watch Bergman, they read Shakespeare, those things. And, and then they'll make a Marvel movie. But that people who make movies are drawing from this big tradition, and then they watch a Marvel movie. They don't just watch a Marvel movie. Anyway, for some reason, I want to say that. But,
well, to your point,
yeah.
I look at the stuff that I've created that's been most successful, right?
Yeah.
Poo Pourri, The Opportunity. I had no idea people would react to The Opportunity the way they react to it. People say it changed their life. People say, "Oh,
my poop doesn't smell." It's amazing.
Well, that too.
I have such smelly poop.
That's Poo Pourri.
Yeah.
We knew
they made a lot of money.
We
So
knew
that
it was
changed people's
funny.
lives. Yeah.
But it was also bathroom humor. Essentially, we had no idea it would do what it did. And then with The Opportunity, I had no idea it would change lives. I just had this idea and wrote a poem, and so you have no idea what's going to hit, and it really does. I love that, what you said. You just keep doing the work.
Yeah, you just keep doing it, and then you don't know. Oh, and this is where it's tying with this other thing. The people involved in Star Wars, if you ever see interviews with them, you Harrison Ford, whatever, they'll be I have no idea why people like this movie. And like, because for us, like Harrison Ford and Han Solo is like a magical guy, and he's just such a great character. And
or it was until they ruined it with the news.
Well, that's another story. But like we respond to it, but for them, it's just something they made.
Right.
Like for them, the process of being Han Solo is getting up, reading my lines, being told to walk in a place, and just is very mechanical and just going through the motions. In fact, Harrison Ford in particular, I've heard him say like some of like small arty movies he's been in that made like $200,000 are just as important to him as like the ones people talk about all the time. So anyway, for us it's magic. For them, it's just something they've made. And like, it's weird. Like and I've had a chance to meet a few of my heroes in various mediums. And it's interesting because in a way they'll be kind of like, yeah, I don't like that work. I'm like, oh, but it's your biggest hit. It's like, yeah, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
You know, me personally, it's not my favorite thing. So, and again, it can be tied up into where they were in their life when they made it and what was going on and so on. But yeah, again, when you make something, it's always something you made. So it's never magic. But when you view stuff, it can be magic.
Yeah.
And honestly, that to me, that's one of the funnest things the best things about being in a medium is like you can just go to the movie theater and go watch Radio Days by Woody Allen or and it's just like magic. You're like, oh my goodness. And that was like a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
That took years of a lot of people's lives. But you just sit for 90 minutes and just can enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost more fun to be a consumer than a maker in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. So anyway, so it's just my final question. Is there anything I haven't mentioned that you want to talk about or bring up or?
Well, not that I necessarily want to. We didn't talk a ton about acting.
Oh, acting. Oh, let's talk about acting, actually. Let's not quit. Because that's one of the primary things. Because this is a unique thing is that he acts. And again, we were talking about this before we went on the air. But like he was acting, more directors come from acting. So like Robert Redford and Charlie Chaplin famously and so on. And then come from cinematography, but film schools generally focus a lot on cinematography. Like I've took an acting class like last year and it was like amazing. I felt like I learned a ton. So anyway, what is it like being an actor and how do you think that informs your other work?
Well, the biggest thing for me, I took off. So when I was in college doing stand-up and all that, I was also acting. I acted in a lot of commercials. I did a film with you. But I took off acting for 15 years when I moved to LA, basically, because I wanted to focus on the writing and the directing.
And also when you're in LA and you say you want to be an actor, you don't feel I mean, there's a lot of people there trying to be an actor.
Well, yeah. And my wife didn't want me to be an actor either. So, but anyway, I started doing it again last year and I was a lead in a Sleepy Hollow adaptation as Ichabod Crane. And it was tremendously useful as a director to be reminded, number one, about how insecure actors are, because you're putting yourself out there and you don't know, first of all, you can't see yourself. So you don't know how you look and how it's coming across. You really have to trust the director to guide you if you're doing something that looks stupid. You feel it out, but sometimes your instincts are wrong. So that was really useful. The amount of work that goes into it is I think surprising for people who aren't actors, because just memorizing is difficult, but then to memorize and to be able to find the best way to perform it, the most interesting, the most authentic way to perform it. Your first read, in my opinion, is usually not that. There are some actors who they say are really good at cold reads. They come in and they just immediately know how to perform it. But most actors will tell you that's not the way they work. They have to spend a lot of time with the text, perform it, even if it's performing it in their heads several times before they find the most interesting way to do it. So as a director, I've always respected actors, but it gave me even more respect to do it again and realize this is really hard. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time and effort. And so I have just a huge respect for actors, but it also helps you think as a director about, which I always did, but it really focuses you on things like motivation and beats and what are we establishing with this line or with this moment? And so it's just very useful.
Yeah, no, and back to Star Wars references. Like somebody said, George, you can write these lines, but you can't act them. And again, it's like when you're presented with something, you're like, how do I say the line is, let's say, good morning, my dear. I don't know. And you're like, there's so many different ways to say that and ways to communicate. You're actually confronted with those decisions, or even like, how do I get across the room? Like, how do I get from this location to another location?
Yeah.
And these little decisions that you're really confronted with as an actor, whereas when you're writing or when you're directing, you can just be like, just kind of skip over it or not think about it.
The actor will figure this out.
Kind of, yeah. Well, and that's where the casting really, really is important. But when you yourself are confronted with that, you can think of it in advance or even see like when it's wrong,
Yeah.
So it's like the little things and even just like the voice and I don't know. It's like acting is something that almost nobody can do well. Like it's like you can have an audition with like 200 people and maybe 2 people will be competent actors. And that's why, again, it's such a rare thing. Like, and that's why Harrison Ford makes the big bucks because you know what? Trust me, they would love to get somebody else to do the same thing and pay them a lot less, but they can never do it.
Yeah.
So he's been acting into his 80s.
Right.
So anyway, yeah. I think, acting, honestly, I mean, to me, when I started in filmmaking, especially since I came from photography, the first thing I did, and again, this shows my ignorance about acting even more, is I went to a bunch of auditions, which I probably should have just gone to an acting class. But to me, I was like, oh, there's auditions. I'll just go to auditions and see how it goes. And I did terribly. But again, it was interesting to be in audition, like on the other side, because I had been part of castings, but I'd never been in the other side of a casting. And honestly, if you want to learn a lot about acting, I mean, the importance of acting and even see acting is have, audition people. And again, and work with an actor.
Yeah.
But I think actors really need to be incredibly intelligent, incredibly good with words, and have good reading comprehension, and be very spatially aware. And that's why it's a weird combination. It's like they're kind of like a form of athlete. It's like they're like Michael Jordan. I don't know.
Yeah, well, especially theater, I would say that's true. But then in film, I think you need to have good reading comprehension, but you also need to have high emotional intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
Because I 100% agree. Like I think one of the reasons why it's hard to be a really good actor is because you have to be highly intelligent. Because if you don't understand the depth of a character, how can you play the depth of that character? Maybe there are some cases where people just kind of luck into that, but I don't think so. I think the really good actors that I've worked with, they understand all the various levels, the surface level story, the subtext.
Yeah.
They understand all of that. And if you don't understand all of that, you can't play it, because you don't even know it's there.
No, it's true. I mean, again, back to like, how does a high school student know how to deal with Ophelia? Like, so if you're in a high school production of Shakespeare, you're like, well, I've never had a girlfriend, but Ophelia, whatever, I can figure that out.
Right.
And the same thing, similar, actually, as you say, I think it's similar to writing, whereas like, you really need to know yourself really, really well, because that's the only person you can ever really understand. So you're like, so this character has this motivation, like he's leading on his girlfriend, and like, well, I've done that, and how did I feel when I did that, and when did I do that, and that wasn't very nice of me, was it? And like, so you have to confront these things yourselves, which is very uncomfortable, because people don't want to think about like motivations. They just want to think, well, I'm just the best boyfriend that's ever been in existence.
Well, I think that's the other thing. You got to be comfortable being uncomfortable if you're going to be an actor, especially, because it is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to pretend and to put yourself out there. And that's why going back to what you were saying with film and theater people being extroverts and social, I think that's one of the reasons why they can pull it off, is because they're comfortable being uncomfortable. And I'm a major extrovert. I love social things, but I still get nervous talking to someone I've never talked before. It's not that I don't get nervous. It's that I'm just okay with being uncomfortable. And in an actor, you're going to be placed in situations where you're either physically uncomfortable, in cases where I like literally had a day old hamburger strapped to someone's face for a commercial. Then you're going to be physically uncomfortable because it hurts or it stinks or whatever. But then you're going to be emotionally uncomfortable when you have to kiss someone who you just met, or whatever. It's going to be the whole range of discomfort.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And also another thing, this is something I learned from the audition when I did those auditions, is that like when you're making plastic arts, again, I do feel plastic arts are very similar to performance arts, but the difference is it's an extension. So like if you're on an audition and you're an actor, it's like they don't like you. I mean, it's you. It's your body. Right. It's like your nose is too big, your eyes are wrong, your ears are wrong,
your voice is wrong, your performance is wrong.
Yeah, where if it's like your portfolio, it's like they don't like your portfolio. Right. And that's something you can improve or change. But you is always you, and there's just no way around that.
Yep.
But sometimes you just have to be like, and it's probably, just have to have and the same thing with portfolios. You have to be like, well, I'm not a good fit for this thing, but there's a place out there for me. So like you think like Danny DeVito, who would think he'd be one of the greatest stars ever? Right. If you met a person who looked like Danny DeVito in his 20s and he's like, I want to be an actor, you'd be like, you're insane. But it really worked. It really worked. And it worked quickly. You can see it in Taxi.
Yeah, I think going back to the vulnerability, I think that's why you feel vulnerable as an actor. Whereas, you're a shooter, I'm a director, you direct. You can hide behind you can not release the thing. You can do whatever you want to do when you're in control of the project and your face isn't on it.
Yeah.
But when you're the actor, even if you say, I don't want my name on this project, your face is in it. You can't hide.
Yeah.
So there's nowhere to run and it's just you out there.
So all the credit and the blame. So
right.
Like somehow back to Star Wars, Harrison Ford gets credit for blasters probably, but he didn't think of blasters. But anyway, yeah, no, that's true. You're really on it. So, but I have to admit, again, this is a dichotomy I've noticed between behind the camera and in front of the camera people, is that behind the camera people kind of grow to resent in front of the camera people because you do work really hard to make them look good. Like in a way, that's kind of your job, but don't. Respect them what they're going through. They've been through a lot. And also, maybe you should try, if you're jealous of the people in front of the camera, try to be one of the people in front of the camera and see how it goes. I mean, go to auditions, take some acting classes. Worst case scenario, you just have some networking and hanging out with people who love acting and movies. But if you're jealous of them sincerely, then there's probably something saying you should probably go for that. And maybe you'll find out, in fact, 100%, that you don't like it.
Yeah.
You like the idea of it, but you don't like it. And then you can move on with your life rather than feeling jealous. Anyway, thanks for coming to talk to me, Joel.
Of course.
Again, Joel Ackerman. Go check out his book, The Opportunity, at Print Immortal. It's got a website. You can order it there, or you can just check out the Poo Pourri ad and go hire his creative agency. So anyway, Joel Ackerman, thanks for visiting with me.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
Best of luck to all of you.